Hi, I'm Angelica, and today I'm going to be covering why women are leaving toxicity more than ever before. So let's get right into it. Such good tea. For a long time, women stayed in relationships that were so toxic, that drained them, stayed in situations that stifled them, with people who were breaking them. And recently, there's been like a shift almost that we're not supposed to stay in those situations, that women are leaving toxic dynamics and refusing to tolerate like less than what their expectations are, which is amazing. But I think it is worth speaking about the why, because part of this, I think there's also been an increase in noticing the male loneliness epidemic, and they are very separate issues, but there are some parts which overlap. And I think it's worth noting that all issues in the world probably do overlap in some regard, but I'm so fascinated by like human psychology, and as an abuse survivor myself, going through I think more than one toxic interaction in my life, it's very important to open the space for discussions and just allow freedom and kindness for people to have that safety network in their communities and society as a whole. So let's get into it. I know firsthand how difficult it can be to leave a toxic relationship because I've been there myself. You have these voices, both internal and external, whether it's from friends, their friends, the abuser themselves, just telling you what you should be doing, how you should be acting, the compromises you need to be making. And it's this constant battle between, is this love? Should I wait it out? And it's this never-ending flood of what ifs, and you sit there hoping that this magical one day will show up and everything will be okay. But it took me a lot to just accept that magical one day was never going to come. And when you do make that decision to leave, it's not like it's finished there for many victims either. I read this statistic today, so that funny statistic today, there we go, which honestly shocked me. So the of women who are killed through abuse, 75% of them in the UK were killed after they left. That is astonishing. So, to imagine that you had the courage to leave, but then you were killed after. And the question is so often asked, well, if it was so bad, why did she stay? Why didn't she leave earlier? And, well, there's your answer. The fear of what comes afterwards, because they're angry. They feel like they've been exposed. Their bad behaviour that was once a secret is no longer a secret anymore. And they don't like it. So there you have it. And we need to speak about why women are walking away from toxicity more than ever before, especially with that kind of statistic in mind, why it's so important. When I finally stepped away, I saw this bigger picture. I thought I was alone in my experience and that other women weren't feeling or experiencing what I was. I knew that obviously there were abuse survivors and victims, but I felt like I was made to feel crazy, that my experience was invalid. And so what's been really amazing is realizing almost this global shift everywhere of women realizing that this is not okay and they're most certainly not alone. So why now? And part of the answer, based off my personal experience and what I've seen through research, is that there is a shift in communication. Naturally, with so much social media and the ability to make burner accounts and kind of share your experiences without exposing it necessarily to yourself or putting yourself in the same danger you historically would have if you went to speak to someone in real, that you can speak to people who are going through similar experiences and realise that firstly you're not alone, and second of all you can have others tell you that what you're experiencing is gaslighting, is manipulation, control, it's abusive. And sometimes that reassurance is all you need to sort of wake up and go, I'm not crazy, actually what I was thinking is real. Because manipulation is one of these so deep rooted brain changing things that unless you sit there and take the time to educate yourself on the science behind manipulation, it's hard to grasp how someone could be in that situation. And I am normally considered a very intelligent girl. I got a degree whilst having kids. That's not an easy thing. On top of that, I was working full time. So you can imagine the willpower and the brain power that I have, on top of being stubborn to make sure I got that degree. But even then, I was manipulated. I was in a toxic relationship where I was being controlled, and I felt like I was so helpless and that I should have stayed in that, because of all the different ways manipulation really do play on your brain. And I can talk about the actual manipulation science side of it in another video, but my focus here is like why women are leaving now. So I think independence is a very big part of it as well. Historically, I don't need to go into too much detail about women's rights, but today we have more freedom to own our own bank accounts, have our own freedom. That's not to say that that is the case for every woman. There is plenty of situations where women are being controlled and coerced financially, and I definitely experienced that. I was working and my ex still found ways of kind of limiting my finances, because everything he earned was his and everything I earned had to go to the family. And I was like really confused, because he was earning more than I was, and it's just so like, it's almost like a piece of art, the way that their manipulation works. And when you step away from it and you actually speak to people and you make sense of what you were going through, you sort of realize, wow, that was so deep. That was very like dark. I also believe, because of culture as a whole, there's been a change in what we accept. I've predominantly seen this on TikTok, women going, oh my gosh, it's absolutely disgusting if he's not getting you flowers. It's absolutely disgusting if he's not in the provider mentality. Because I think women have experienced this being in a masculine energy. That's not to say there's anything wrong with being a boss girl that takes over everything. I've been a boss girl. But that's not to say that when I get home, I don't need a safe space and I don't need a partner that makes me feel like I am a girl and I've got someone who has my back. And I think it's the same for men as well. That's not to say that they're feminine in any shape or form, but we all need that healthy relationship in which you can feel that when you come home, it's not going to be a war zone, it's going to be a safe zone where you can let down your guard from the rest of the world and go, and unfortunately, because of this kind of misconstrued dynamic, women have not been able to feel that. And that is also why I think there's a big shift in what women are choosing to accept and what they're tolerating in the early stages of dating. I don't think anyone ever goes into the relationship with the idea that they're going to tolerate bad behaviour, but once you love someone, once you have kids, it intrinsically gets so much more complicated, and that's why I don't think anyone should ever be blamed for staying in that kind of dynamic. Part of this has also been the shift in realising that women are not rehabilitation centres for men, that we are not therapists as we have historically been used as. I even have a letter from my ex talking about, he made a list of things that he was going to improve on. One of it, he knew he was using me as a therapist. He literally said, I'm not going to use Angelica as a therapist anymore. And, you know, like when I read that, I was like, you know what you're doing. I asked him so many times to go to therapy and he knew what he was doing. And so, you know, I think women are learning that even though we have natural caregiving tendencies, it's literally in our biology. That doesn't mean that our peace is worth less than anyone else's, and that we shouldn't be keeping a grown man who's responsible of himself happier than ourselves. Baby break. Got him back to sleep now. Arthur is awake, so if you hear baby in the background, that is why, but let's carry on. I'm going to speak about the male loneliness epidemic and how there's an element of it that crosses over into this of women's abuse issue. So first disclaimer is that male loneliness epidemic is a thing. 100% I'm an advocate for mental health and of course men's mental health. And for anyone who is watching this, I stayed in my toxic relationship as long as I did because of my advocacy for men's mental health, that I really wanted to see my ex heal. I really wanted him to go to therapy. I encouraged him to go to therapy. I said we could even go to couples therapy if that was the only way that he wanted to deal with it. However, through that experience, I learned there is a stark difference between a man who appreciates he has issues and takes the time and energy to heal versus someone who is in toxic masculinity and weaponizes men's mental health so that he can get away with abuse. And that is a big fear that I have for a lot of other women who may have gone through what I did, where they want to support men and they want to heal, but at the same time there comes a realization of self-love and self-preservation where you need to go, I'm not your doctor. You came to me as a partner and I want to support you, but if you are destroying me in the process, I have to take a step back. Afterwards, when I spoke to various types of men, there were some men that I had met through work circles that were in their toxic masculinity era, whereby women who actively chose themselves or chose celibacy and chose not to date men unless they met certain standards, they like villainized them. They literally were like, oh, women are so bad. And it's as if women choosing themselves was a problem rather than a symptom of something deeper that they didn't want to address. And if I was able to get into a deeper conversation with some of these men, you'd see that they had deep-rooted childhood issues, and predominantly it came from their fathers. This idea that you're not supposed to talk about feelings, or they would be very badly treated, and that kind of passed on down a cycle, and that goes into generational trauma. However, that's not fair that men then take it out on women. So we need to kind of appreciate why women taking that stand and leaving toxicity is a good thing. Most of the time, women leave relationships not because they just want to and they decided one day that was what they were going to do. Most of the time, it's because they've exhausted every possible route they could have to make it work. They grew tired of all the chances they had given and nothing changing. Women, I think, are growing from this conditioning that we need to fix men and that we need to be submissive to every need a man has, because we have them too. And if you look at women today, mothers especially, they're doing more on their own than any other generation has. So we're not physically, mentally able to handle more than that. And we do need men to step up and take control of themselves, make themselves accountable, go to therapy, not rely on anyone else to carry that burden of their toxic behaviour. And of course, this is not all men. When I say this is not all men, I have so many amazing male friends who are wonderful. I absolutely adore them. But there are obviously other men out there, and enough of them, who are toxic, that there are statistics which show DV survivors, deaths, abuse. And in the UK, we've even got recently, which is a really great thing, but also highlights the issue, that when you can call the police now, there's a few stations across the UK which specifically have domestic violence units to handle domestic violence, which is great because we need it. But why do we need it in the first place? And I think we need to look at the why. And so I came to the conclusion that a lot of men are quite angry or villainising women for no longer tolerating this behaviour. And that only deepens the issue for women, because they realise how alone they are and how unsupported they've been, especially when you have children in the equation. If anyone's ever babysat or had any proper responsibility with a child, you will realise how tiresome it is. Therefore, you don't really have space in that equation to be in a toxic relationship or have an unsupportive partner, because there's too many cases where you have a single parent who is in a relationship. And by that I mean that they are in a romantic relationship, but they're doing everything to do with their mothering duties or fathering duties in some cases on their own. If you are someone who has walked away or you're contemplating walking away, I really want to highlight that staying in a toxic relationship doesn't benefit anyone but the abuser. And especially when children are involved, that toxic relationship is not going to do them any favours. I hear way too often about people who stay together for the kids and it still did them damage. So I think it's better if you realise that you are not selfish for refusing to shrink yourself to make someone else more comfortable. Walking away from a toxic relationship or abuse, but they're just both toxic, it's not weakness, it's self-respect. And, you know, just because I've gone through toxic relationships in my life and seen and experienced abuse, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't believe in love. I am still a hopeless romantic. I love love. When I see other people in love, it makes me so happy. And I don't sit there and go, oh, I wonder what's happening behind closed doors. I still like to be hopeful and believe that there is good out in the world, and there is. In partnership, there is a beauty and connection, and it's still out there in the world. I see it with so many happy couples. And love doesn't always have to be romantic. There's so many different forms of love in the world that exist. Family, friends, even for yourself. I think learning to fall in love with yourself is one of the biggest and most wonderful things that you can do. And not in an egotistical, narcissistic type of way, but in a way where you go, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to appreciate the things that are good about myself, because you are worthy of feeling that way. Love will always be there in the world for you. It's never going to be found in the places where you have to sacrifice yourself in order to stay and have someone love you. Love obviously does come with compromises, whether you're a parent, whether you're a friend, family, work, anything, gym. You know, you have to sacrifice eating that slice of cake. But when you have to sacrifice your sanity, your peace, everything about yourself to the point that you don't recognize who you are anymore, chances are that's not real love. And I think what I really love about why women are leaving toxicity is the awareness around that. We're not tolerating anything that we shouldn't be anymore. And I think that's a good thing. Let me know what your thoughts on this are. Have you experienced this shift or witnessed it yourself in life around you? Let's have a conversation in the comment section, and all I ask is that everyone is kind and courteous and there is no hateful energy. If there is, comments will be removed and accounts blocked. Otherwise, I truly do hope everyone finds internal peace and honest, pure, kind love.